Welcome, brave souls, to another chilling episode of our scary stories. I'm your host, weaving together the threads of fear and mystery that blanket our world. Tonight, we journey to a serene lakeside retreat, where tranquility hides an ancient terror beneath its depths. Can you hear the ripples of the unknown, the hum of ancient secrets? Dive in if you dare, but remember, once you enter the world of our scary stories, there's no going back. A blanket of twilight mist cloaked the secluded lakeside cabin where Helen and Gerald, a retired couple, savored their tranquil lives. Nestled amidst thick pine trees, the cabin with its timbered charm was a picturesque escape from the world's hustle and bustle. In the morning, the dew-drenched ferns and the sweet scent of spruce that wafted in the cool air offered a serene greeting. At dusk, the lake shimmered under the setting sun, its surface a mirror to the flaming skies. And when night came, a symphony of crickets under the silent watch of 1,000 stars lulled the world to sleep. Lately, though, the serenity had become a stranger. Helen, with her soft silver hair and gentle eyes, had first noticed the anomalies. As she sat by the window with her embroidery, her gaze would often wander to the lake. There was a peculiar rhythm now, a different dance to the waves. Ripples appeared, subtle and silent, stirring the lake surface without a cause, as if invisible pebbles were tossed into the water. "Isn't that odd, Gerald?" Helen's voice, a wisp of worry in its tone, punctuated the quiet afternoon as she pointed to the disturbance. Gerald, engrossed in his gardening, peered at the lake from under the shade of his straw hat. His aged yet sharp eyes, once a marine biologist's keenest tools, scanned the waters. "Probably a fish, love," he reassured, returning to his roses, dismissing it as an innocuous event. Yet an odd prickling sensation crawled up his spine, a vague sense of unease he couldn't quite shake off. But the lake wasn't finished with its strangeness. That evening, as twilight painted the skies in shades of purple, the nocturnal symphony seemed subdued. The chirping crickets and hooting owls felt distant, their sounds dampened as though hesitant to break the silence that clung to the surroundings like a lingering chill. Awake in the midnight hour, Helen felt a shiver trickle down her spine, a cold wave of anxiety that made her sit upright. There it was again, a strange sound, faint yet clear, a low, mournful hum coming from the direction of the lake. It was an eerie melody that danced on the edge of hearing, weaving itself into the whispers of the night. It was a sound that didn't belong in their peaceful haven, a sonic shadow that sent ripples of fear coursing through her heart. "Gerald," she breathed, clutching his arm, her knuckles whitening. "The sound, it's back." Gerald listened, the warmth of sleep deserting his eyes. The unnerving hum filled his ears, a foreign cadence in their familiar nocturne. A splash of dread washed over him, replacing his earlier dismissal with a growing concern. As the hum faded away, swallowed by the shadows of the night, Helen and Gerald lay awake. The rhythmic lullaby of the waves was no longer soothing. The symphony of the night was no longer familiar. It felt as if the lake itself had stirred from a deep slumber, breaking the serenity of their twilight years with ripples of a chilling undercurrent. Morning came with a reluctant sun, its rays piercing through the veil of mist that clung to the lake. A cool wind stirred the surrounding pines, their whispers carrying a hint of trepidation that mirrored the couple's feelings. As Gerald sat at the breakfast table, hands wrapped around his warm coffee mug, he could not ignore the traces of worry etched on Helen's face. "Helen, darling, we must discuss what's happening," Gerald said, his voice steady despite the nagging apprehension he felt. His scientific mind yearned for an explanation, a logic to the lake's odd behavior. With a sigh, Helen put down her knitting, the green woolen sweater half finished. She looked into Gerald's earnest eyes, nodding, acknowledging the need for a conversation they both had been avoiding. "Gerald, it's like the lake is alive." Her voice trailed off, her words weaving into the soft rustle of the wind outside. "I know, love. It's unsettling," Gerald admitted, absently running his fingers over the coffee mug. He fell silent, gathering his thoughts, then began to share his theories, delving into possible scientific explanations. Underwater currents could have been altered by recent rainfall, the shift in temperature causing unusual disturbances. As for the hum, he suggested it might be the effect of wind on a newly formed underwater cave, a whistling echo that carried into the night. Yet, even as he spoke, Gerald couldn't ignore the gnawing doubt. His explanations seemed plausible but incomplete, like puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit. He had known this lake, studied it during their years here, and the recent anomalies didn't align with the water body he was familiar with. He felt like a stranger in his own home, grappling with an unseen intruder who was steadily encroaching upon their peaceful existence. That night, as they retired to bed, the air hung heavy with unease. The familiar sounds of the night seemed muted, each rustle of the leaves, each hoot of an owl magnifying their anxiety. Then it came again, the deep, resonant hum rising from the lake, wrapping their cabin in an eerie embrace. This time, Gerald felt the dread curling around his heart. The sound was louder, insistent, as though echoing from the depths of an ancient world. It filled the air around them, seeping through the cracks in the cabin walls, chilling their bones. Gerald, Helen's voice was a whisper, her hand clutching his. Her eyes, wide in the moonlight filtering through their window, mirrored the fear that now consumed him. As the last vestiges of the otherworldly hum died down, they lay awake, entwined in their shared apprehension. The echoes of the unseen had invaded their sanctuary, turning their haven of tranquility into a theater of escalating mystery. The first light of dawn was greeted with an eerie silence that had seemingly settled over their world. Gone were the jubilant calls of birds greeting the new day, replaced instead with an unsettling quiet that reverberated around their isolated cabin. Helen found herself observing their surroundings more intently, her worry gradually turning into a creeping fear. The squirrel that often darted playfully near their porch was conspicuously absent. The swans that graced the lake with their elegance were nowhere to be seen. Their cheerful golden retriever, Max, seemed to share her unease. His ears would twitch with every sound, his body visibly tensing. He would often wander towards the lake, his nose sniffing the air, a low growl rumbling in his throat as his eyes watched the placid water surface. "Something's wrong, Gerald," Helen finally voiced her concern, her eyes straying to Max, who was again growling at the lake. Gerald, attempting to maintain an air of normalcy, tried to brush away her concerns with a wave of his hand. The wildlife probably got scared by those odd sounds. "They'll return once things quiet down," he reassured her. But he too felt the absence, the unsettling quietude that contrasted sharply with the normal serenity. That evening, their fears took a tangible form. After his usual enthusiastic dinner, Max ventured out towards the lake. His growls echoed in the silent air, his stance alert. Helen and Gerald watched, their hearts pounding in synchrony with the dog's warning barks. Then, in a blink, Max was gone. One moment he was there, a golden bundle of fur against the darkening horizon, and then he was not. Helen's sharp intake of breath echoed in the quiet cabin, her hand flying to her mouth in disbelief. Gerald was at the door in an instant, his shouts for Max slicing through the silence of the night. But their calls were swallowed by the ominous quiet, leaving behind a void that echoed their growing dread. The vanishing shook them to their core. Max, their loyal companion, had disappeared without a trace, his absence transforming their worry into a chilling reality. The lake, once a symbol of their peaceful retirement, now seemed like a lurking predator, its placid surface hiding secrets that were gradually encroaching upon their lives. The safety of their home was compromised, the walls of their cabin no longer a shield against the unnerving events unfolding around them. As they retreated into their sanctuary, their minds were a whirl of fear and uncertainty. The echoes of the unseen were now taking form, the lake's ripples becoming waves that threatened to engulf their tranquil existence. Days melded into a blur of worry and restlessness for Helen and Gerald. The empty dog bed was a harsh reminder of their loss, the silence and oppressive weight that bore down on them. The lake lay quiet, its mysterious ripples subsided, and the strange hum ceased, yet its tranquil facade seemed more menacing than ever. Then one late afternoon, the earth shook. Cups rattled in their cupboard, and pictures skewed on the walls. The quake was a minor one, but the tremors seemed to echo the fear that gripped their hearts. Gerald stood frozen in the doorway of their cabin, his eyes glued to the lake, watching it roil and churn in response to the earth's shudder. "It's seismic activity, Helen," he murmured, more to himself than to his wife. He was a scientist at heart, trained to find reason amidst chaos. Yet he couldn't ignore the ominous connection that was forming in his mind, the puzzle pieces inching closer to a frightening picture. The earthquake's immediate effects were minimal, but its aftermath triggered a series of changes that were impossible to ignore. The strange ripples returned with a vengeance, more frequent, radiating across the lake like a call to some unseen entity. The haunting hum grew louder, more insistent, its cadence a soundtrack to their escalating fear. Gerald could no longer dismiss these events. He was driven by a desperate need to find answers, to unravel the mystery that was swallowing their peace bit by bit. His old marine biology equipment was pulled out from the attic, the echo sounder and hydrophone dusted off, ready for use. "Helen, I need to investigate this. We can't live in fear," Gerald said, his determination echoing in the small confines of their cabin. His eyes bore into hers, pleading for understanding. Helen, though filled with worry, recognized the same tenacity that had made Gerald a renowned marine biologist. She saw in his eyes the relentless pursuit of truth, a spark that had dimmed in retirement but was now kindled anew. With a slow nod, she gave him her quiet approval, her hand gently squeezing his for reassurance. Their tranquil retirement had been shattered, their once peaceful lake now a playground for something unseen, something unfathomable. As they braced for the storm that was brewing beneath the calm, they knew they could rely on one thing, their unwavering partnership. Whether the tremors from the deep brought revelations or fear, they would face it, as they always had, together. The following morning, the first rays of sunlight found Gerald preparing his equipment by the lake. Helen watched him from the porch, a cup of lukewarm coffee in her hands, her heart fluttering with a mixture of apprehension and admiration. She felt a wave of nostalgia seeing Gerald in his element, even under such unsettling circumstances. With the echo sounder secured in his weathered rowboat and the hydrophone ready for deployment, Gerald pushed off from the shore. Each stroke of the oars echoed in the hushed morning air, the usually soothing lap of water against the hull carrying a note of foreboding. He reached the center of the lake, the cabin looking like a tiny speck of comfort in the distance. Helen kept her eyes on Gerald, her fingers absently circling the rim of her coffee cup, the chilling hum from the lake a dissonant soundtrack to her thoughts. Her gaze fell upon the now calm waters, their serenity disturbed by the strange ripples that had haunted them. It was hard to reconcile this peaceful scenery with the fear that had taken root in her heart. In the middle of the lake, Gerald dropped the echo sounder into the depth, its green line dancing on the small screen, a visual pulse of the underwater world. Then he lowered the hydrophone, its line disappearing into the cool depths. The earphones were a cold press against his ears as he waited, the usual sounds of aquatic life coming through, the soft swish of water, the occasional crackle of small sediment displacement. But beneath these, he could discern a low resonance, a sound that sent chills down his spine. The same eerie hum, clearer now, and beneath it, something else. A slow, rhythmic pulse, almost like a heartbeat. His hands shook as he pulled up the hydrophone, his heart pounding in his chest. His eyes darted to the echo sounder's screen. It showed the familiar topography of the lake floor, but there, in the depths, was an anomaly. An amorphous shadow, large and unmoving, a monstrous blemish in the lake's heartbeat. With a sense of dread knotting his stomach, Gerald rowed back to shore. He had come seeking answers, and now he had them, each one intensifying his fear. As he reached the safety of their cabin, Helen was by his side, her worried eyes reflecting his own terror. He relayed his discoveries, his words casting a long, dark shadow on their day. There was something in the lake, something massive, something alive, and it had been woken by the recent seismic activity. The beautiful lake, their sanctuary, was housing an ancient creature, an entity that was stirring from its age-old slumber, its ripples and hums a testament to its growing restlessness. The undercurrent of their fears had taken a tangible form, the darkness beneath the surface becoming an all-too-real nightmare. Days turned into a turmoil of dread and anticipation, every ripple on the lake's surface, every low hum in the dead of night, amplifying their fears. The creature's presence loomed over them, a phantom resident in their tranquil paradise. Gerald's discovery had provided an explanation, but it also turned their lives upside down. One afternoon, as the skies darkened with storm clouds, Gerald and Helen sat huddled in their living room. The radio spat out a weather warning. A storm was approaching, one that promised heavy rainfall and violent winds. A sense of doom settled over them, the upcoming tempest seeming to mirror the tempest in their lives. The storm hit at midnight, a howling beast that shook their cabin and lashed the lake into a frenzy. Rain hammered against their windows, blurring their view of the tumultuous outside world. Gerald and Helen sat together, fingers intertwined, their hearts pounding in sync with the storm's rhythm. Suddenly, a roar echoed over the sound of the storm, a guttural, unearthly sound that caused their blood to run cold. They rushed to the window, peering out into the night. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the churning lake. And there, for a fleeting moment, they saw it. A massive, shadowy form broke the surface of the lake, its size dwarfing their cabin, its form silhouetted against the stormy backdrop. As quickly as it appeared, it was gone, plunging back into the depths with a thunderous splash that sent waves rushing towards their cabin. They stood in shock, their worst fears confirmed. The creature was not just an abstract entity, not just ripples and hums. It was real, gigantic, and shared their world. As the storm raged on, they could not shake off the image of the creature, its ominous form permanently etched in their minds. The next morning arrived with a deceptive calm. The storm had passed, leaving in its wake a serene sky and an eerily peaceful lake. But for Helen and Gerald, the peace was shattered. The lake was no longer a symbol of tranquility, but a harbinger of fear. They had witnessed what lurked beneath, the age-old creature now an inescapable part of their existence. The undercurrent had been unleashed, its shadows emerging from the depths to loom over their once peaceful lives. The morning after the storm, Helen and Gerald felt a heightened sense of isolation. Their serene retreat had turned into a prison, hemmed in by a monstrous beast. It was a sensation they couldn't shake, even as the sun painted golden streaks on the tranquil lake. They couldn't stay silent anymore. Their lives were at stake. The local authorities needed to be alerted. The inhabitants around the lake had to be warned. But as Gerald reached out to local police, his report was met with skepticism. A mythical beast in their placid lake. It seemed too absurd to believe. Refusing to be deterred, Gerald enlisted his old colleague's help. He penned detailed letters explaining the anomalies he had detected, the changes in local fauna, and the seismic activities he had noted. He told them about the hum, the creature's emergence during the storm, and Max's inexplicable disappearance. The letters were sent far and wide to universities and marine research institutions. He urged them to send experts to investigate this anomaly, this creature that seemed more at home in ancient myths than their quaint lake. Each sealed envelope was a cry for help, a plea to the world beyond their isolated cabin. Meanwhile, the lake lay tranquil, its surface mirroring the clear blue sky. But the couple knew better. They knew about the restless entity that lurked beneath, stirring the depths, disrupting the peace. The illusion of tranquility had shattered, replaced with a constant, gnawing dread. Every day was a fight against fear, each night a battle against the creeping terror. Their daily routines became a series of mechanical actions, their minds always alert to the ominous hum, the suspicious ripple, the sign of a threat that was all too real. They could only hope that the world would believe their incredible tale. That help would come before it was too late, before the creature decided to rise again from the depths. The undercurrent of their life had turned into a whirlpool, threatening to engulf their existence. They could only hold on, brace against the tide, and hope that the storm would pass. They were no longer just inhabitants of the lakeside cabin. They were the keepers of a chilling secret, living on the edge of a terrifying revelation. Weeks passed. The couple's appeals did not fall on deaf ears, but their urgency seemed to dissolve over the distance. Replies arrived, filled with skepticism or assurances of future investigations. But no immediate help came, leaving Helen and Gerald to face their fears alone. Their once idyllic life had warped into a tense vigil. They watched the lake, scrutinized every tremor, each ripple, their ears attuned to the eerie hum that continued to echo from the deep. Life became a series of whispered conversations, hushed tones that seemed fitting for their haunting reality. Then one day, a team arrived from a nearby university, young, eager researchers, fascinated by Gerald's accounts. They brought with them an array of equipment, a sense of hope, and the promise of answers. For several days, the lake was swarmed by researchers in inflatable boats, hydrophones and echo sounders exploring its depths. Gerald and Helen watched from their porch, a tangle of emotions churning within them. Relief that they were no longer alone in their struggle, fear of what might be found, and a fragment of hope that they could reclaim their peaceful existence. One evening, as the sun's rays gave the lake a shimmering gold sheen, the researchers gathered at the cabin. Their faces, once lit with anticipation, now mirrored the apprehension Gerald and Helen had been living with. "There's definitely something down there," the lead researcher, a woman named Dr. Shaw, admitted. "We've captured a similar low-frequency sound to what you described, and sonar indicates a large, undefined object at the lake bottom. It's not a typical formation or known creature. We need more data, but we cannot ignore what we've found." The lake had revealed part of its secret, the monstrous entity no longer just a couple's terrifying ordeal, but a recognized anomaly. The undercurrent was beginning to surface, and the world could no longer ignore the mysterious ripples on the lake. As night fell and the cabin's lights glowed in the darkness, a new chapter was starting. The silence had been broken, and the investigation was taking its first concrete steps into the unfathomable mystery of the lake. As the investigation continued, a grim tension hung over the lake, the once peaceful ambience replaced with a buzzing undercurrent of activity. More experts arrived, bringing their knowledge and equipment, their skeptical curiosity gradually turning into serious concern. The creature, or whatever lay at the bottom of the lake, no longer seemed like a far-fetched tale. It was real, tangible, and apparently sentient. Researchers managed to capture more images and sounds, and though they were cryptic and difficult to interpret, they undeniably pointed to a single conclusion. An enormous, unknown entity resided in the depths. On a chilly evening, Gerald and Helen found themselves huddled together with the team inside their once tranquil cabin. Dr. Shaw spread out a series of sonar images on their worn-out dining table. Her fingers traced the indistinct form, a profound seriousness etched on her face. "We believe," she started, pausing to look at everyone present, "that we are dealing with a creature that predates any known species. It's massive, perhaps ancient, and the seismic activity likely disturbed its natural hibernation or dormant state." She continued, explaining their hypotheses, the size of the creature extrapolated from the sonar images, and the scientific significance of this discovery. It was a strange feeling for Gerald and Helen, hearing their fears spoken aloud, validated, and dissected. The creature from their nightmares was now at the center of scientific curiosity. The lake had surrendered its secret. The ripples, the hum, the seismic activity all led to this, an ancient creature, a living relic from an era long past, residing right in their backyard. Their once peaceful retreat was now the site of a monumental discovery. That night, as they lay in bed, the weight of the revelation pressed upon them. The threat was now recognized and tangible, but it did not diminish their fear. They held each other, their hearts beating in sync with the low hum from the lake, the undercurrent of their lives having surfaced and taken form in the shape of an age-old leviathan. The terror was no longer hidden, and as they stared into the darkness, they knew their ordeal was far from over. News of the ancient creature quickly spread, and their quiet lakeside retreat was soon overrun with media and curious spectators. The tranquil serenity was replaced with a buzz of excitement, fear, and fascination. But amid the frenzy, Gerald and Helen had to face the creature's increasing restlessness. Its hum became more frequent, ripples larger, and more violent. The ancient creature was waking up, and its stirring was felt throughout the lake. Then, one foggy dawn, the lake erupted into chaos. A massive form rose from the depths, its sheer size dwarfing everything in sight. The creature was an entity of awe and terror, a relic from the past awakened in their world. People screamed, retreating from the shoreline as a wave of water rushed towards them. Cameras flashed, capturing the monumental spectacle. The researchers stared in disbelief, their theories and speculations meeting a terrifying reality. The creature lingered at the surface, a low sound emanating from its form that echoed across the lake. The sunrise painted an eerie glow on its massive body, the sight an awe-inspiring tableau of ancient survival. Then, with a cascade of water, it sunk back into the lake, leaving behind a scene of panic and fascination. Gerald and Helen stood at their porch, hands clenched tightly, the scene forever seared into their minds. The undercurrent of their lives had surfaced, its ripples extending beyond the confines of the lake. Their world had irrevocably changed, their fears had surfaced, and their journey with the creature from the depths had just begun. From then on, their life by the lake became a paradox, a tranquil home overshadowed by the constant reminder of the ancient beast beneath. The retired couple were no longer just spectators in the world of the unknown. They were participants in a saga of discovery and survival, living on the edge of a world where reality intertwined with the realms of ancient creatures. The lake was no longer a mere body of water. It was an enigma, a living testament to the mysteries that lurked beneath the surface, waiting for the right ripple to awaken. And there you have it, brave listeners, another tale of terror brought to life by the eerie echoes of our scary stories. Gerald and Helen's tranquil world unraveled into a chilling nightmare, their everyday now underscored by the haunting hum of the ancient leviathan. What mysteries lurk beneath the surface of your world, waiting to send ripples through your reality? Until next time, keep your ears tuned to the whispers of the unknown. And remember, behind every mundane experience lies a tale waiting to send shivers down your spine. This is our Scary Stories signing off for tonight.